السادة الحضور الكرام، الجلسة القادمة بعنوان سجالات الإعلام الذكي منصات وتكامل مؤسساتي، يدير الحوار الأستاذة نجلة حبريري كبير محرري الشؤون الدولية في صحيفة الشرق الأوسط، ويشاركها الحوار السيد بريندان كوين المدير التنفيذي في المجلس الدولي للاتصالات الصحفية، كما يشاركها الحوار السيد إيرل J ويلكنسون الرئيس التنفيذي للرابطة الدولية لوسائل الإعلام الإخبارية، ويشاركها الحوار السيد بيتر كروبش الرئيس التنفيذي لمجموعة وكالة الأنباء الألمانية. Ladies and gentlemen, our next session titled Debates in Smart Media Platform Institutional Integration, moderated by Ms. Najla Habriri, International Affairs Senior Editor at الشرق الأوسط. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Brinden Quinn, Managing Director, International Press Telecommunication Council, IPTC. And please welcome Mr. Earl J. Wilkinson, CEO of International News Media Association. Please welcome Mr. Peter Krobsch, CEO of DPA Group.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Najla Habriri. I'm International Affairs Editor at الشرق الأوسط, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to today's session on debates in smart media platforms and institutional integration. For years, I think it is fair to say that the media debate has been dominated with traditional versus digital. That debate is now far behind us. The real challenge today has to do with institutional integration. So how editorial judgment, standards, technology, and leadership are coming into play in an era shaped by platforms, by AI, and an increasingly fragmented audience behavior. This session will not focus on tools, it will focus on structure, how media organizations are adapting internally, and most importantly, how credibility and trust are maintained at scale, and how professional standards are coping as AI is becoming part and parcel of our daily work in newsrooms across the world. To do that, it is with great pleasure that I welcome a fantastic panel. To my left is Peter Krobsch, President and CEO of Deutsche Press Agency, otherwise known to us journalists in the room as DPA. Welcome, Peter. To his left is Earl J. Wilkinson, who delivered a fantastic keynote speech this morning. And just in case you've missed that, Earl is Executive Director and CEO of International News Media Association, INMA. Welcome, Earl.
Thank you.
And to his left is Brinden Quinn, Managing Director of the International Press Telecommunications Council, IPTC. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Peter, if I could start with you. News agencies are very often the starting point of most journalists around the world. You serve multiple platforms, and I think it's fair to say that the last few years have seen a revolution in the way we work, whether it be in newsrooms around the world or in news agencies. How is DPA structuring its editorial and operational decision-making today in an era where AI is part of our daily work, in an era where we have to serve various platforms at the same time and reach wider and wider audiences?
Yeah, Najla, thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here, ladies and gentlemen. So this is, I think, the main questions of this time when we are looking what has an impact on us as a news agency. Then we look at user behavior and technology, and sometimes it's interdependent. And so we have seen three waves that we have been going through. The first was the internet. That means we were not the fastest ones. The second one was social and search engines, so everybody could communicate, and now we have AI, so machines can produce human-like content. Yeah. So, but this technology offers a lot of chances, yeah, because so the interoperability has always been a core competency of news agencies. So we often say news agencies because they are all cooperating with each other. We are the blood vessels of the international news flow. So we are serving each other, we are exchanging news. And on the other hand, that has a lot to do with technology. Yeah? In the old days, it was like working on the same set of metadata. Today, it's like playing on all platforms. So that's where we end up now. And so the AI as a technology offers us a lot of opportunities because at the end of the day, the promise of the news agency is to render you as a media customer a service that always gives you what you need to serve your own customers. And if you serve your customers on these different stages, on traditional media brands and traditional media channel, but also on all these social media and AI, the news agency has to cope with it.
Amazing. Earl, across INMA's global membership, and you see a lot of media leaders around the world. You just came back from Asia. You speak to a lot of them, I think it's fair to say. What would you say separates an organization that is successfully integrating editorial, technology, and commercial functions from an organization that is still struggling to do so?
Well, the integrated companies are outperforming the ones who are not integrated for obvious reasons. What they are doing is they are organizing their companies, these three areas, around growth narratives. It doesn't matter to me what the growth narrative is. Let's just say it's subscription revenue. You know, I think if you rally around a narrative and not a department, I think you're going to have a better outcome. When you look at what's happening in the Nordics, you're looking at Axel Springer, you're looking at the New York Times, all of them are playing around with versions of this. I think having a product mindset is important, bringing editorial and technology, et cetera, together. And then finally, I would say, and I mentioned this in my speech this morning, how do you organize around audiences as opposed to departments? I think that's critically important. And the ones who are not, the ones who are lagging ultimately are the ones who view technology as the help desk. You know, and yeah, I mean, it's an old way of thinking. It's the difference between a 20th century operating system and a 21st century operating system. Yeah.
Really good. Brendan, you also work with media organizations around the world. Where do you see the biggest friction between newsrooms, technology providers, so the big three or the big four, and platforms? Because we are having to serve so many platforms at the same time.
There are many points of friction, I think, and also thank you for having me here today. It's great to be here. So I think we form a great trio, I think, here where we've already been talking about the interoperability between the different organizations and the way to bring organizations to a product sort of thinking and not treating technology as a help desk. So I think that's where our organization really comes into play, because we've been around for 60 years advising media organizations on their technology work and how they can work together, share technical standards to improve what they do and how they reach the rest of the world. And frankly, until now, that's been a little bit sort of boring and tedious, because it's really been just about the metadata, making sure people work together to share content with the caption being in the right place and the meta tags being in the right place. But suddenly now we're in this core piece of the puzzle where the place where media organizations reach the big tech, where they cross over, is on the technology side, on the metadata side, and that's what we do. And so suddenly we've been thrust in the spotlight, literally, around how we can help media organizations to face big tech, face social media platforms, what they can do in response to what's going on with their content. So I can speak more later, but we've been working on how organizations can opt out of having their content trained. We've been helping organizations to digitally sign their content so people can understand where it came from. And there'll be many more areas coming along as this industry evolves.
let me just follow up on that, actually, because during our pre-panel conversations, it was very interesting when you talked about digital signature. So, you know, in an age of AI, that is really important, but also the opt-out option. So how does your organization, people you advise, how are news organizations supposed to keep control over their own content in an age where AI is being used for distribution today? How do we protect copyrights? How do we protect journalists' work? And how do we protect the credibility that comes with a news organization, a story that comes from a particular news organization?
Sure. So there are some very specific technologies that are out there to help news organizations to convey the rights that they already hold over their content. It's not really a new legal thing, but it's just making it clear to the AI engines, to the content crawlers, that the news organizations, the content owners, may not want their content to be scraped in such a way. And so the classic standard in the area is called robots.txt. It's been around for 25 years. It doesn't cover AI opt-out. So at the moment, all that media organizations can do is list each AI crawler one at a time and say, you're not allowed, you're not allowed, you're not allowed. But what that means is that the equivalent is a burglar could come into your house and they can take anything they want from your house, and then they leave their name at the door as they're leaving and taking all your stuff with them. And then you're allowed to put that name on the list on your front door and say, Julie Blogs is no longer allowed to come in and steal all of my stuff. Well, they've already got all of your stuff. So it doesn't really help very much if you can only do it post hoc. And so we're working on standards with a group called the Internet Engineering Task Force. Those standards are taking a long time to get people to agree on them because the big tech companies are involved and they're trying to dominate the conversation. So in the meantime, we at IPTC have published a best practice guideline. So if you search for IPTC opt-out guidelines, then there's a document we've put together bringing together all of the not quite satisfactory technical standards that are out there and showing news organizations how they can do the best they can to tell the AI providers that they can't use that content. And we are continuing to work to get a better version of the standards out there. There's things like a really simple licensing that has come up earlier today, and a company, Cloudflare, has published a thing called Content Signals, so we're recommending those as well, but they're sort of de facto standards rather than de jure standards, and so we're really trying to get a real technical standard that everyone can agree on and people like the EU can mandate.
Thank you, Brandon. The metaphor is really, really interesting, and I'll be using that in the future as well, while obviously quoting you, because we believe in copyrights in this place. Peter, news agencies obviously rely on credibility. That is the main value of a news agency. How is DPA integrating the use of AI while safeguarding accuracy, responsibility, and editorial judgment?
Yeah, so if you as a news agency, you cope with AI, you have to differentiate between different areas. The one is for sure, if you're a commercially financed company, you have to take good care of your copyrights, of your content rights, which is not that easy. But on the editorial field, you really have to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. Yeah, so because when AI can be used to kind of speed up editorial processes. But when generative AI came into place, one of the first things we did, at least in DPA, is set up some rules, for the editorial office, because at the editorial office there can be, so if you make mistakes, it becomes detrimental, because it's a simple equation. So you are a news agency, you deliver to like 200 domestic customers. You also deliver to maybe, so we have around 100 agency partnerships, So, and they have again maybe 200 domestic customers. So one mistake can be spread within minutes to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of outlets. So what we are doing is, so we have like very common principles like the so-called alpha and omega principle. So a person kicks off the action of an AI process and it controls it at the end. Nothing goes on the wire without having a person just giving it, saying, okay, this is okay, and I stand for this. But there are a lot of also technical means that help us. So when we come to the big field of disinformation and detecting disinformation, this is a wide area.
How do you use AI for fact-checking, actually, Peter? And also, you did speak about the 5 rules that you are following within DPA when you did integrate AI. What are those main 5 rules? And then when it comes to fact-checking, has the process of fact-checking your news changed since you integrated AI into the newsroom?
Yeah, so these 5 rules. So the first rule is, we see AI positive, but we are not, but we are always aware of the danger. Yeah, so this is the one thing, the 2 rules, and the 3rd rule is all about education, and the 4th rule is this alpha and omega rule, and the 5th rule I've forgotten. But when it comes to fact-checking has become such a sophisticated profession. So checking facts to get things right has always been part of the core process of a news agency, but of any quality media outlet. Yeah, but what we see today is so you have always more sophisticated methods to cheat, and so you need to have more sophisticated methods to debunk. Yeah, and there are very special kind of challenges. Like if you have, recently we had a project supporting a TV program, in live fact-checking, because when you're an interviewer and you interview somebody who is obviously telling something which is bluntly wrong, and normally it's always after the show there comes on, we have fact-checked that, but then the frog has jumped into the water. Yeah, it's done. You need to do it live, and so this is one of sparking more sophisticated methods. Not only have a proper fact-checking with a human and a technology base, but also speed it up. That you can, even in such situations like a live TV program, you can inform the presenter, okay, the guy you're interviewing said that and that and that, but as we have checked, it is like otherwise. Yeah, and it's so you see how sophisticated this profession becomes.
That is very, very interesting. Earl, at a leadership level, should AI be treated primarily, in your view, as a revenue lever, a productivity tool, or a structural disruptor? I know you love this question, so go for it.
Well, walk before you can run. I think every media company has gone through the same process of experimentation, so inevitably you start with productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, productivity. I think naturally the more sophisticated companies are going to be looking at things like personalization, etc. But the third piece that you talked about, that structural disruptor, I mean, I don't think that's a choice. I think that's being thrust on us right now in terms of the collapse of search and the collapse maybe of social as a content discovery method. It's going to push us in directions that we never imagined, mainly that we're going to have to become masters of those direct relationships. And I cut this out of my presentation this morning just because, of time. Our industry has never been good at direct relationships dating to the 19th century. I mean, we sell units of circulation to advertisers. We speak indirectly with the tech platforms. We optimize for SEO. We don't stare people and customers and readers in the eyes. So the idea that we're suddenly going to pick up on this skill set is a tough one. And I think that's what media companies right now are wrestling with.
That's very interesting. So from what you see around the world, Earl, how are news organizations, how are the different ways that news organizations are dealing with the smart media revolution? Do you see people who are changing the way they're hiring? Do you see upskilling at large scale? Do you see maybe news organizations that might not be the global, not your big names, New York Times, etc., maybe in smaller countries, medium-income countries, doing a better job than maybe more established news organizations?
When we started this, if you'd asked me this 3 years ago, one of the fun things that we saw as an association with members in 100 countries is you had companies in Ghana who were on par with The Guardian or the New York Times or Axel Springer, just because there's a hierarchy in our industry, the bigger to the smaller, the older to the younger, whatever. But for one moment, we were all new to this. I think that's evened out, or that's changed. I think it's now morphing into a resource-based caste system internationally, something that I think I'm probably a little more familiar with, as are you. So, look, I still think that, I've talked actually with a number of companies just since this morning who are trying to figure this out. They're just trying to figure out digital transformation. God forbid where AI fits into the transformation of digital itself. I would just say, and maybe we're going to talk about that in a moment, I just think that ultimately comes down to talent, talent, talent. And, I joked this morning, and someone, you were there, someone got me on my comment this morning about old dogs. But at the end of the day, maybe those old dogs can't be taught these new tricks. And we're going to need people that are not classically trained in journalism, maybe even trained as creators, but they come in with these hybrid skill sets: journalist, data fluency, product mindset. And I just would gently suggest that we probably need an injection of that talent pool into where we're going next.
I mean, that's a very interesting reflection, Earl. I'll take that to Brendan, actually. We were talking previously about how fast AI is revolutionizing our industry, maybe at a pace that we've never seen before. Many journalists are worried whether they'll have a job tomorrow. And I think that news organizations around the world are trying to say, absolutely you will. It's just that that job description will change. How do you see AI changing the way we hire, and how do we fill those gaps that we see today in newsrooms and beyond?
Yeah, I think this is the huge conversation of sort of the last 6 months or so, is will it take people's jobs away? Like, there's some statistics coming out from some surveys, people saying it, just not even across media, but just across industry generally, is it taking away the entry-level jobs? What's going to happen? And it seems that the clarity is starting to emerge that actually it's an enabler and an accelerator rather than a replacement for junior workers and even for senior workers. So it really increases productivity. Even personally, I use AI coding tools. So we make a few tools for our members, for media companies, to help them use our technologies and our standards that have come out. And I haven't been a professional programmer for 20 years, but suddenly I am again, because I can use coding tools like Cursor and Claude Code, and I can just tell it what to do, and it'll go and write something for me in a few minutes. And then luckily I've got enough memory of what I used to do to say, that's not quite right, or you need to write some tests here. And so suddenly it's like having a very smart junior person right next to you in the office that doesn't cost anything, or costs like $50 a month. It's amazing. And I think learning on the journalism side, learning how to use those kinds of tools for the research work, for analysis, for fact-checking, like to work out which facts you need to check, and maybe not to actually go and make calls to people, but to structure the things. I think going back to the talent point, people who learn how to do that and how to use that to accelerate their work are going to be the winners in this new era.
Can I just weigh in? This is probably not part of the thought process, but something you just said triggered me. INMA launched an AI answer engine about 10 months ago, okay? And I did not realize I've only done this 36 years. You would think at some point I would have figured out what we're sitting on. I didn't realize until AI emerged, and we set that on top of our content universe, 90% of which is cut off from the general web and other search engines and answer engines. And it has just exploded in terms of, our members asking, big questions about their businesses, and we've got answers I would never have come up with as a human being. And as you guys know, I've got some really smart people on my team. They admit they would have never come up with it.
May I take it from there?
Please do.
I take it one step further. So if our people are doing interviews, we are throwing 90% of the content away. Yeah, because a story is like a condensed piece of information. But all the rest, what the people learned during the talk and all the facts they gathered, we throw them away today. Yeah? If we store this information,
Audio recordings.
it is like so, and therefore one of the biggest learning for us when AI came was that it was the proverb: if you have video, you have it all. Yeah, because you have the quotes, you have the persons, you have the situations. You can have AI running over there detecting named entities.
My developers were on me early in the we need more video, more audio, and I didn't understand. Yeah. And I guess that's the issue. Are you guys not, I didn't mean to turn this interview into an interview, but are you guys just not amazed, though, whether it's ChatGPT, your own LLM, your small language model, the breadth of knowledge? We're now doing conferences. I'm applying AI to our editorial coverage of our own conferences, and I cannot believe what we've been sitting on. And to your point, it's never gotten out into the general public until the last 10 months or so.
It is.
I'm blown away.
Yeah, and it's this sheer abundance of content we never cared about, yeah, in generating this content and in structuring and reusing this content. So I don't think we will lose jobs because of AI. So we will, and if we do, we are on a transformation point, yeah, to look completely different on the editorial things we have been doing, yeah. It's like a little like schemanism. Yeah, when you're a scheman, how do you know how to become a scheman? You have to die first. That means you have to get rid of all your old beliefs, and then you have a moment of presencing, and then you put the things newly together, and that is maybe kind of a moment like that.
I mean, all of this is very hopeful for a journalist like myself, and I think I'll add to that. It's not just the breadth of content and information that we have, just using our in-house AI platform that SRMG and Najla have developed. It also the time that it gives journalists, the extra time that we find ourselves with, because productivity has been boosted so much. I think one of the worst things that you can ask a journalist to do is to transcribe an hour-long interview. When you use, particularly when you develop your own AI platform, that it does the job for you. You have more time to fact check, to get bigger context, more important context, historical figures, codes, more interviews. So you create more time, and therefore you give the journalist /editor / sub-editor, podcaster, etc., more time to actually improve that content. So I think I absolutely agree with the productivity point there. Brendan, I would like to come back to something that we've talked about before the panel, and it had to do with liquid content and how we're adapting within smart media, how we're adapting our content to different platforms in different ways, reaching very different audiences. Tell us a bit more about that.
Maybe just one point on what Peter and Earl were saying as well, which is I think when you can publish more content, when you can publish the background, the transcripts, the actual raw interview, I think it really helps to build trust with your audiences. So that came up earlier. I think Tony Gallagher was saying that to build trust with your users, with your subscribers, the more information you can give them about your journalistic process, your fact-checking, your reporting, the more the trust will build up. And do we have time to talk about the content signing
Absolutely.
stuff?
Absolutely.
So there's a thing that we've been working on. I was hoping it would come up in the misinformation panel earlier, but another initiative that we're working with, it's variously called C2PA, Content Credentials, Content Authenticity Initiative, and what we call it is media provenance. So what that means is you can use technology, use a digital signature, the same way that you protect a website with HTTPS and you get a little padlock in the corner of your web browser. The same underlying technology is used where the media organization has a certificate, a digital cryptographic certificate. It's not blockchain, but it's cryptography. And that's used to digitally sign the actual media assets. And then that means that users can go in the future and check that it really did come from who it says it came from. And I think that is going to be a key pillar in regaining and reviving and retaining trust with users, with audiences. It will hopefully be adopted by social media platforms. It's already being used by LinkedIn, but other groups like TikTok and Meta are involved in this initiative as well. And even it can be used internally within media organizations just to show where the content came from, to surface the digitally signed metadata around it. And so bringing that back to what you originally asked, I think that can feed into this idea of liquid content, which did come up a little bit earlier today as well. So I wasn't the first one to mention it today. But it's the idea of taking the reporting and the story and building it, breaking it down into its constituent parts, into the raw facts. So this person said that, this event happened at this date, this bomb went off, or this explosion happened in this location. Bring it right down to the core facts. And then you can play with how to surface that to users in new and interesting ways. So maybe you could build an AI that understands how much a particular reader, a particular consumer has already heard about this content, and so they know they don't have to repeat all of the background information that's in the article. They can just provide the new information. Or you can just provide news from a particular angle. Maybe you know that the user's interested in a particular political viewpoint, and so you can help to surface things in the way that is meaningful to them. And it could be across audio, video, text platforms, can adapt to where the user is at the time. Are they walking around commuting with the headphones in, or are they sitting at the desk where they've got a desktop machine? The news can adapt to meet the needs of the user.
Brilliant. It is exactly about that. It is how we reach audiences on different platforms, audiences that can be viewers, listeners, readers, all at the same time, and getting them that information that we think is relevant or most relevant to them in the best way they can ingest it. So absolutely. Peter, can I ask you about whether you think governments have a role to play at all in regulating the way AI is distributing news and information around the world? Because we do have to deal with gigantic AI companies. Presumably, these people, probably around 4 or 5 people, are going to be the most important actors in the world of AI in the next 2, 3 to the next decade. Do governments have a role to play? Should news organizations be working with governments to help regulate the way AI disseminates news content?
You know, so I always have I differentiate very strongly when it comes to government influence, because DPA is an organization which is very far from government. We are owned by 170 plus media companies, and so we keep the distance to the government. What I see where the role of the government lies is just making sure that we have an even playground, a fair playground. So coming back to like the lawmaking on the European level. So as far as AI was concentrated, there has now been kind of several laws, the Digital Service Act, the General Purpose AI Code of Practice now in place since August this year, and they are dealing with things what Brandon quoted, how can you allow or disallow the big techs scraping your content and just taking it away without paying anything for it. So, and I think so the role of the government is taking care of a fair playground, and so we can act, yeah. So we can talk to the governments like the big techs do exactly the same. I'm afraid with a lot more power, yeah. But this is the ultimate duty of the governments, just making the playground that media competencies can exist, because so our role is to be the lighthouses in an ocean of content, yeah, where you can, and this is absolutely necessary for society. And then we are back to the governments, yeah. They have to take care that society can work, and tangible information is one of the cornerstones.
And we are seeing this debate play out today in Europe, in Australia, and beyond. So that's quite interesting. I think, Brandon, what do you think? What's your take on that? Because we did speak about South Korea maybe having a law that regulates how AI is being used, particularly in news dissemination.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to where governments are acting at the moment. So one is on the regulation of who can train content and the opt-out that Peter and I have talked about. And on the other side, it's about declaring AI-generated content. So that's more where South Korea is playing at the moment. And California as well is putting through a law around making sure that when AI-generated content is used in social media and in search platforms and other online platforms, that there is some sort of visible marker that signifies content that was generated or manipulated somehow by AI. And actually, this CGPA standard that I was just talking about is one of the technologies that can be used to do that.
That's very interesting. So I'm very wary of time. We have a couple of minutes left, and therefore, Earl, I want to start with you. It's going to be the same question for all of you guys. Massive question. I need a quick answer if that's possible. If you were to start a newsroom today, a news organization, what would be your one non-negotiable? It can be editorial, it can be commercial, it can be organizational. What would be the one thing?
So blue sky?
Absolutely.
I would organize around audiences first. I would build an organization where there is a journalist, there's a product person, there's an audience specialist, etc. Build around audiences and have journalism live within that mandate.
Amazing. Peter? I mean, you're already leading a news agency, but if you were to start something fresh today, what would be your non-negotiable?
Yeah, so I would first look at the customers and find a spot where the customer demand meets a demand for lighthouse content, and that's what I would build an organization around.
So audiences, Brandon.
First I was going to say what Earl said, next I was going to say what Peter said. I think they're both great answers. So yeah, just look for untold stories. I think one of the great things about the world that we're in now is that there is, no matter how small the niche is that you're interested in, there will be some people out there that share that interest with you. And so if you, depending on what it is you're trying to do, but if you don't think about being a local news provider, but if you think of being a global news provider in a particular subject area, then there is still a lot of scope for successful news publishers. And maybe it'll be a Substack, maybe it'll be a podcast, but there's many ways to tell stories in the current age, and we need to take advantage of that.
I hate to add one more thing, but if I had my dream newsroom, I would not be hiring pure journalists anymore.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
I would be hiring, now, okay, folks, don't shoot me. I'm hiring 23-year-olds who have journalistic training, who are data literate, and who are audience specialists. I mean, isn't that what we are enamored with creators? Why wouldn't we be hiring journalists like that? What I'm worried about is our journalism schools aren't teaching that yet.
They're not teaching data literacy and audience behavior?
It's what you and I were taught back in the day, my day further than your day, but nevertheless, I mean, nobody taught me about the business of news, and I'd like to see that taught.
Yeah, but you will, one or two old blokes would not be bad, yeah, who take care for...
Why did you look at me when you said that? I don't know why that is.
Who needs hair anyway?
Yeah, it's because of our just mutual agreed design.
Yeah, have you noticed on this panel, there's only one of us that stands out, okay?
And I do care about my hair, so fair enough. I think, thank you to all three of you. I think the conclusion I came up with is that smart media is not necessarily defined by technology alone. It's really defined by how institutions are integrating credibility, editorial standards, technology, yes, it keeps on evolving, but also understanding audiences. So thank you very much for ending on such a hopeful note, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Peter. That was very good.